I woke up to the sharp, unmistakable sound of a car door slamming shut. It wasn't some distant noise drifting in from the street, not the usual background hum of a late-night neighbor pulling into their driveway. No, this was different, close, too close. Right outside. My eyes flew open, and for a few seconds, I lay completely still, my breathing shallow, every sense on high alert. The room was quiet, save for the low, steady whir of the ceiling fan overhead. It was familiar, my bedroom, my home, but something about it suddenly felt off. Instinct took over, and I reached across the bed, searching for warmth, for reassurance, for Vanessa. My fingers met only empty sheets. Cold sheets. A knot of unease coiled tight in my stomach as I pushed myself up on my elbows, my mind sluggish but quickly sharpening. I turned to the nightstand, my eyes locking onto the glowing red numbers slicing through the dark. 2:47 a.m. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. Vanessa wasn't home. A dozen thoughts crashed into each other in my mind, tangled and frantic, none of them making any sense. Where was she? When had she left? And how the hell hadn't I noticed? The last thing I remembered was crawling into bed around 11. She had been right there beside me, curled up with her phone, barely glancing up when I kissed her goodnight and switched off the lamp. And now, she was just gone. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, my bare feet meeting the cool hardwood floor. Every movement felt sluggish, my body still weighed down by sleep, but my mind? That was wide awake now. Adrenaline stirred in my veins, slow but steady. For a fleeting second, I tried to convince myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe she couldn't sleep and went for a late-night drive. Maybe there was some kind of emergency, and she didn't want to wake me. Maybe. But I didn't buy it. Not for a second. Vanessa wasn't the type to just go for a drive in the middle of the night. And if there had been some kind of emergency, my phone would have been ringing off the hook with calls or texts. But there was nothing. Just silence. And then, just as I reached for my phone, I heard it, the faint, deliberate click of the front door unlocking. Every muscle in my body tensed, my breath catching in my throat. She was back. For a moment, I didn't move. I just sat there, frozen, listening, my heartbeat slamming against my ribs. The door eased open with a slow, careful twist of the knob, the hinges barely making a sound. Then, the soft shuffle of fabric against fabric as someone, Vanessa, stepped inside. She was trying to be quiet. I got to my feet, moving slowly, deliberately, as I crept toward the bedroom door. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't call out to her. I just waited. Stood there in the shadows. Listening. The house was still, as if she'd paused just inside the doorway, hesitating, uncertain of her next move. Then, softly, something was set down. Her purse, maybe. A moment later, the faint rustle of clothing. I took a step forward, my pulse pounding in my ears. The air in the house felt different, heavy, charged, like the air right before a storm. And then, I saw her. Vanessa stood in the dimly lit hallway, her back partially turned as she slipped off her heels, holding them in her hands instead of letting them hit the floor. Her hair was a little tousled, her makeup, normally so precise, looked just a bit smudged. And the air around her carried something else. A scent that made my stomach clench and my jaw go tight. Men's cologne. Not mine. The realization hit me like a fist to the gut, knocking the breath clean out of my lungs. Vanessa shifted slightly, just enough for the soft kitchen nightlight to cast a faint glow on her face. Her expression? Completely unreadable. Not guilty. Not ashamed. Just, blank. I cleared my throat, but my voice came out rougher than I meant it to. You were out late. She barely reacted. No flicker of surprise, no guilty jolt. If she was startled to see me standing there in the dark, she sure didn't show it. I couldn't sleep, she said, her tone too smooth, too controlled. So I went for a drive. A lie. I caught it instantly. Vanessa had never been a good liar, she overthought her words, hesitated just a second too long. And right now? I saw it in the way she shifted on her feet, the way her fingers flexed around the straps of her shoes, like she was trying to keep herself steady. The worst part? She wasn't even making an effort to sound convincing. I let out a slow breath, forcing my hands to stay loose at my sides instead of clenching into fists. And it didn't cross your mind to send me a text? I asked, keeping my tone level. She shrugged, her face unreadable. Didn't want to wake you. Another lie. Vanessa always had her phone in her hand. She texted me about the smallest things, don't forget eggs when I was at the store, check the mailbox if she was expecting a package. And now, suddenly, she decided against it. I didn't say a word. Just stared at her. Waiting. For what? I wasn't even sure. A better excuse. A flicker of guilt. Some kind of explanation for why my wife, was creeping back into our house at nearly 3 in the morning, smelling like another man. But she didn't say anything else. Instead, she let out a quiet sigh, like I was the one being difficult. Then, without another word, she walked past me, heading down the hall toward the bathroom. The door shut. A second later, the sink turned on. I let out a slow, measured breath, my jaw tightening as my eyes drifted toward the small table near the front door. And there it was. Her purse. Her keys. And right beside them, her phone. Face down. I barely had a second to process that before the screen lit up. A text. Unknown number. Just one word. Miss you. I froze, my eyes locked onto the glowing screen, my heartbeat hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The steady hum of the bathroom sink only made the silence around me feel heavier, stretching the moment out. This was real. Not paranoia. Not some stupid misunderstanding I could reason away. I wasn't overthinking. I wasn't imagining things. Something was happening. And whatever it was had just walked through my front door, holding her heels in her hands like a teenager sneaking in past curfew. I swallowed, forcing my breath to stay even, my steps deliberate as I moved toward the table. My fingers hovered over the phone for just a moment. A hesitation. A flicker of doubt. Then I pushed past it and picked it up. Locked. Of course. I turned it over in my hands, staring at the black screen, willing it to light up again. But it didn't. The message, the proof, was gone. I could unlock it. Vanessa never changed her passcode. I knew it. Always had. But as my thumb hovered over the screen, something in me stalled. Some desperate, hopeful part of me still wanted to believe there was an explanation. That I wasn't about to uncover something that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my wife. About my marriage. But another part of me, the one that had been whispering doubts in the back of my mind for weeks, already knew. I wasn't the one tearing my marriage apart. Vanessa already had. The bathroom door creaked open, and I quickly set the phone back down, stepping away before she could see me near it. She emerged a moment later, her damp hair swept back, her face scrubbed clean of the smudged makeup that had given her away. She was wearing one of my old t-shirts, the same one she always threw on when she wanted to act like nothing was wrong. Like she could slip back into our routine and pretend this night had never happened. I watched as she walked past me, heading toward the bedroom without so much as a glance in my direction. Like I wasn't even there. Like my presence, my suspicion, meant nothing. Something inside me twisted, a mix of anger and disbelief simmering just beneath the surface. I let her reach the doorway before I spoke. Vanessa. She stopped but didn't turn around. Yeah. I let the silence stretch, waiting for her to say something first. To explain. To offer even the smallest shred of an excuse. But she didn't. I exhaled slowly, keeping my voice steady. Controlled. Where were you tonight? This time, she turned, her expression unreadable. But I noticed the way her posture changed, the slight shift of her weight, the way her arms crossed loosely over her chest. Defensive. I told you, she said, tilting her head just a little. I went for a drive. Where? A flicker of hesitation. Barely there, but I caught it. Like she hadn't expected me to push. Like she thought her half-hearted answer would be enough to make me drop it. Just around, she said with a shrug, too casual, too smooth. I just needed some air. Another lie. I could see it in the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. In the way she carefully chose each word, like she was constructing a story as she went. I took a slow step forward, lowering my voice. And that took you until almost 3 in the morning? She let out a quiet breath through her nose, the corners of her lips curving just slightly. Not guilt. Annoyance. What is this, an interrogation? She asked, shaking her head, her tone light, almost amused. Shane, come on. You know I get restless sometimes. I studied her, trying to figure out if she actually believed I was that naive, or if she just didn't care enough to put real effort into the lie. I called you, I said, keeping my voice even. Twice. That made her pause. Just for a second. Her brows pulled together, her lips parting slightly before she smoothed her expression back into something neutral. Detached. My phone was on silent, she said. Didn't see it. I glanced toward the table. Her phone sat right there. I knew for a fact that it had lit up just minutes ago. But I didn't call her out on it. Not yet. Instead, I nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch between us again. And for just a fraction of a second, I saw it, an uneasy flicker in her eyes. Okay, I said finally, stepping back. She lingered for a beat, like she was waiting for me to press further. When I didn't, she gave me one last unreadable look before turning and disappearing into the bedroom. I stood there, listening. Waiting. The bed creaked, the covers rustling as she settled in. And then, finally, I turned back to the table. Staring down at her phone. I had 2 options. I could let this go. I could convince myself that her vague, empty answers were enough. I could shove the doubt into the back of my mind and tell myself that I still trusted my wife. Or, I could listen to the feeling in my gut. The feeling that had been growing louder, stronger, over the past few weeks. The one telling me that something was already broken. Whether I wanted to admit it or not. I reached for her phone. This time, I didn't hesitate. I typed in the passcode. The screen unlocked. And just like that, everything changed. The soft click of the phone unlocking felt deafening in the stillness of the room. The glow from the screen cast a faint light against my fingers as I stared down at it, my pulse thudding loud in my ears. A heavy weight settled on my chest. I wasn't the kind of husband who went through his wife's phone. I never had a reason to. In the 7 years Vanessa and I had been together, trust had always been the foundation of everything. I never questioned where she was. Never doubted her loyalty. I was never the paranoid type, never the guy who overanalyzed every text message or felt the need to track her location. But now, I wasn't even sure if I knew the woman lying in our bed just a few feet away. The cold dread in my stomach deepened as I forced my fingers to move. I tapped on her messages. The unknown number sat right at the top of her messages. No name. Just a string of digits. The knot in my stomach tightened as I tapped on the conversation. Miss you. That was it. The entire thread. No history. No previous messages. No response from Vanessa. Just two simple words from someone who wasn't me. She had deleted the rest. My jaw clenched as I exhaled slowly, forcing my breathing to stay even. Backing out, I scrolled through her other messages, scanning them one by one. Most of it looked normal, chats with friends, group texts, work updates. But something about it felt off. Vanessa wasn't the type to keep her inbox clean. She let messages pile up for months, never bothering to delete old texts from delivery services or spam numbers. But here, there were gaps. Empty spaces where conversations should have been. She had been covering her tracks. Hiding something. Hiding him. My fingers hovered over the screen, hesitation creeping in. Check her email. Her social media. The thought alone made my stomach twist. I wasn't sure I could handle what I might find. Wasn't sure I wanted to. It was one thing to have suspicions, another to see the proof, undeniable and staring back at me in black and white. Some desperate part of me still wanted to believe I was wrong. That I was overthinking this. That there was some logical explanation I hadn't considered. But deep down, I already knew. And then, I saw it. Her call log. My chest tightened as I pulled it up, my throat going dry as my eyes scanned the list of recent calls. And there it was. The same number. Again. And again. Late at night. Early in the morning. Sometimes just a few minutes. Sometimes nearly an hour. The same number from the message. My grip on the phone tightened as a tremor ran through my fingers. This wasn't just a couple of casual texts. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Who was he? I didn't know how long I stood there, frozen, my eyes locked onto the screen as the weight of it all pressed down on me. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, like it was closing in. And then, as if the universe had been waiting for the perfect moment to twist the knife. The phone vibrated in my hand. A new message. From him. Can you talk? The final confirmation. I sucked in a sharp breath, my entire body locking up as a flood of emotions crashed over me all at once, anger, betrayal, disbelief, heartbreak. I wanted to wake her up right then and there. Shove the phone in her face. Demand the truth. I wanted to see her scramble for an excuse, watch her try to weave another lie. But I stopped myself. No. Not yet. Confronting her now would only give her a chance to twist the story, to manipulate the situation, to make me second-guess what I already knew. She had already lied to me once tonight, about where she was, about why she was home so late. I wasn't going to give her another chance to lie again. Slowly, deliberately, I locked the phone and placed it back on the table, my fingers twitching with the urge to hurl it across the room. But I needed to be smart. Storming in, shouting accusations, demanding answers, it wouldn't get me the truth. If she had been hiding this for weeks, maybe longer, she wasn't going to suddenly crack just because I called her out on it. She would deny. Deflect. Manipulate. Make me feel like I was the crazy one. I wasn't going to give her that power over me. I took a slow, steady breath, forcing my heartbeat to settle, forcing my hands to unclench. Then, without a word, I turned and walked back toward the bed, slipping under the covers beside her. Vanessa barely stirred, her body instinctively shifting toward mine, drawn by habit. The familiar motion sent a sharp, painful jolt through my chest, a cruel reminder of what we once had. Of what was already gone. Intimacy that now felt like a lie. I lay there, staring up at the ceiling, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. The room felt different now. Colder. Unfamiliar. Like I was lying next to a stranger. Tomorrow, I'd get my answers. One way or another. The morning light filtered through the blinds in soft, muted streaks, but I barely noticed. I had been awake for hours. Lying there in the silence, my thoughts running in endless loops, replaying every detail like a broken record. Sleep had never been an option. How could I close my eyes knowing what I knew? What I had seen. The messages. The late-night calls. The way she had slipped into the house like she didn't want to be caught. Every moment from last night ran through my mind over and over, a slow-motion train wreck I couldn't look away from. But this wasn't a nightmare. This was real. And now, as Vanessa stirred beside me, stretching lazily before rolling onto her side with a soft sigh, something shifted inside me. I wasn't going to let her lie to me again. She blinked a few times, adjusting to the light, her expression smooth, unbothered, like she hadn't spent the night sneaking around behind my back. She yawned, rubbing the sleep from her eyes before finally glancing over at me. "Morning," she mumbled, her voice thick with drowsiness. I didn't respond. I just studied her. Watching. Waiting. Looking for anything, some flicker of guilt, some tell that she knew she had been caught. But there was nothing. Just the same detached indifference from last night. Like I was the one imagining things. Like she hadn't done a damn thing wrong. The anger simmering inside me threatened to boil over, but I swallowed it down, forcing my voice to stay calm. "You got home late." It wasn't a question. Vanessa stretched again, letting out a slow breath as she rolled onto her back, staring at the ceiling like this conversation was nothing more than an inconvenience. "Yeah," she said flatly. "I told you, I couldn't sleep." I sat up, running a hand through my hair, exhaling through my nose in a slow, measured breath. "Where'd you go?" A hesitation. Just for a second. Barely noticeable, but I caught it. "Just around," she said finally, her voice light, casual. "Drove for a bit. Got some fresh air." A lie. We both knew it. And she didn't even care enough to make it believable. I turned toward her, resting my elbow on my knee, my voice lower now. "Vanessa." She finally looked at me, her gaze guarded, her expression unreadable. I didn't blink. Didn't look away. "Who's the unknown number?" For just a fraction of a second, I saw it. The mask slipped. A flicker of something in her eyes. The tension in her jaw. The quick, almost imperceptible swallow. And then, just as fast, it was gone. She smirked. Like this was funny. Like I was some fool grasping at straws. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice smooth, casual. Like I had just accused her of something ridiculous. I clenched my jaw, gripping the edge of the mattress, forcing myself to stay in control. "Your phone got a message last night," I said evenly. "From an unknown number. Miss you." Vanessa's face didn't change. She didn't flinch. Didn't panic. Didn't scramble for an excuse the way someone caught in a lie would. She just sighed, running a hand through her hair before shaking her head. "Jesus, Shane," she muttered, rolling onto her side and propping herself up on one elbow. "You're really going through my phone now?" I didn't blink. "That's not an answer." She huffed, sitting up and pushing the blankets off like this whole conversation was exhausting her. "Okay, fine," she said, rubbing a hand over her face. "If you must know, it's just someone from work. A friend." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "A friend," I repeated, nodding slowly. "Right. A friend who texts you at 3 in the morning saying, 'Miss you.'" She rolled her eyes. Unbothered. "Yeah, actually," she said, her tone laced with irritation. "Not everything is some grand conspiracy, Shane." My hands curled into fists, the rage burning under my skin like slow-building fire. She wasn't even trying to deny it. Not really. She wasn't apologizing. Wasn't stumbling over her words. Wasn't even trying to soften the blow. She just didn't care. She was mocking me. Acting like I was the one being ridiculous. Like I was the problem. I exhaled sharply, my gaze locked on her, my mind screaming at me to wake up and see this for exactly what it was. She didn't respect me. She wasn't afraid of getting caught. She wasn't even sorry. So that's it, then, I thought. That's her excuse. I nodded to myself, something shifting inside me. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about who she was. And it was about who I wasn't going to be anymore. Vanessa arched a brow, her lips curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. I don't need an excuse, she said smoothly, standing up from the bed and stretching like this was just another morning. Because I haven't done anything wrong. I watched as she crossed the room, completely unbothered, pulling open the dresser drawer and grabbing a pair of leggings and a t-shirt. She wasn't just lying to me. She was daring me to do something about it. She tossed her clothes onto the bed, then glanced back at me, tilting her head slightly. Are we done? She asked, her tone almost bored. I stared at her, my pulse pounding, my mind racing. And then, for the first time since this started, I realized something. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She thought she had already won. She thought I would stay. I inhaled slowly, letting the truth settle in my bones, letting it burn away the last remnants of denial. I had been waiting for a confession. For her to break. To apologize. To give a damn. But Vanessa wasn't going to give me that. She had already made her choice. Now, it was time for me to make mine. I sat there for a long moment, watching her. The way she moved so effortlessly, so unbothered, as if my pain, my suspicions, were nothing more than a mild inconvenience she had to brush off before starting her day. She wasn't just indifferent. She was confident. Confident that I wouldn't push. That I wouldn't demand more. That I would let this slide, the way she clearly expected me to. And that was the moment I knew. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into questioning my own reality. Because I didn't need a confession. I already had the proof. My heartbeat steadied as I stood from the bed and walked toward the closet. Behind me, Vanessa sighed, irritation creeping into her voice. Really, Shane? This again? I ignored her, reaching into the top shelf. My fingers brushed against the smooth envelope I had placed there just 2 days ago. I pulled it down, turned, and held it up. Vanessa's eyes flickered to it, her expression shifting for just a split second. She masked it quickly, but I saw it. That flicker of something. Fear. Unease. I set the envelope down on the dresser, folding my arms across my chest as I watched her. You don't have to tell me the truth, I said, my voice eerily calm. Because I already know it. She let out a short, humorless laugh, shaking her head. Oh my God, Shane. What are you talking about now? I didn't blink. Didn't falter. Open it. For the first time since this conversation started, Vanessa hesitated. And in that hesitation, I saw everything. Slowly, she stepped forward, reaching for the envelope with careful fingers. She slid out the photographs. One by one. Her breath hitched as she flipped through them. Her. With him. Walking into a hotel. Sitting too close at a bar. Standing in a parking lot, her hand on his chest, his fingers curled around her waist. Undeniable proof. I had followed her 2 nights ago. I had already known, before I saw the text messages, before the unknown number, before last night's sneaky return home. But I had wanted to see it for myself. To know, without a shadow of a doubt, that I wasn't crazy. And now, there it was. Vanessa let out a slow, measured breath, lowering the photos to her side. She didn't drop them. Didn't tear them up. Didn't even look away. She just stood there. And then, she shrugged. A cold, dismissive, almost amused shrug. So. That single word hit me harder than I expected. I had braced for excuses. For tears. For a desperate attempt to deny it. I hadn't expected her to just, not care. I repeated it, my voice quieter now, disbelief creeping in. So. Vanessa sighed, shaking her head like I was the one being ridiculous. Like I was blowing this out of proportion. Like I was the problem here. Shane, come on. This stuff happens. People get bored. I stared at her, my chest tightening, the air in the room suddenly feeling too thick, too heavy. People get bored. That was it. That was all this meant to her. 7 years of marriage. 7 years of trust, of love, of building a life together, gone. Thrown away like it was nothing. Because she got bored. The ache in my chest twisted, shifted, became something sharper. Something final. I nodded. Not at her. At myself. A slow, quiet nod as something inside me settled into place. Pack your things, I said, my voice steady. You're leaving today. Vanessa let out a short, amused snort, shaking her head like I had just said something ridiculous. Oh, don't be dramatic. I didn't move. Didn't blink. You think I'm joking? I asked. I'm done, Vanessa. She tilted her head, studying me, the smirk still lingering on her lips. You're not going to leave me, she said lightly, almost playfully. You love me. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. I did. The words landed between us, heavier than I expected. For the first time, I felt the weight of them. The past tense. But I don't even know who you are anymore. Vanessa rolled her eyes, arms crossing over her chest. Oh, please. You're not going to throw everything away over one mistake. You didn't make a mistake, I cut in, my voice unwavering. You made choices. Over and over again. And now. You're going to live with them. She hesitated. Just for a second. Her smirk faltered, her expression shifting, like, for the first time, she realized she might actually lose. And then, just as quickly, it changed. Her body language softened. Her lips curved into something gentler. She stepped closer, reaching for my arm. Shane, she said, her voice quiet now. Smooth. Apologetic. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. We can. I stepped back. She froze. Pack your things, I repeated. This time, my voice left no room for argument. A sharp breath left her lips as she turned away, pacing the room. This is insane, she muttered, shaking her head. You're seriously overreacting. I didn't respond. She turned back, eyes narrowing, scrambling for a different approach. Oh, I get it now, she accused. You want to punish me. That's what this is, right? You just want me to hurt the way you're hurting. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. I don't care why you did it. My voice was even, almost tired. I don't care if you try to spin this into my fault. I don't care about anything anymore, except the fact that I want you out of my house. Vanessa stared at me, lips slightly parted, like she couldn't quite believe this was happening. Like she had never actually considered the possibility that I would choose to let her go. And then, finally, she saw it. She saw that I was serious. An hour later, she was gone. At the end of the street, a car was already waiting for her. The moment the door shut behind her, something inside me cracked open. I had braced for devastation. For regret. For some unbearable, crushing grief. But as I stood there, staring at the empty space where she had been, all I felt was relief. I was free. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. Maybe this was just the beginning.